Good evening. I'd like to call to order the joint study session between the Lakewood Planning Commission and the Lakewood City Council in Lakewood, Colorado on December 4th, 2017. Will the clerk please call roll?
Paul.
Here.
LeBure.
Here.
Skilling. Gutwein.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Harrison. Here. Roybal.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Johnson. Beta.
Here.
And the Planning Commission, Hollander.
Here.
Bartlett.
Here.
Cohn. Here. Eady.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Sinks.
Here.
And Sukalski.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to start with the presentation before we get into the rest of the agenda for the evening. And I would just like to remind folks, it sounds like people can't hear us in the back. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? All right. So we'll make sure that when we all talk, we'll talk into our microphones. And this is always a lot of fun. We have our friends from PAHA here tonight, so please come on down. Don't be shy. Come on down here. Lee McCain?
Elima, yes.
All right, our president.
Thank you.
Welcome. Floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, council members and Mayor Paul, for having us here tonight. We are Friends of PAHA. We are a nonprofit board of volunteers, and we help to raise funds for some of your city summer programs for people with disabilities called Camp PAHA and Partners in Transition. We have a video that's going to describe camp, but wanted to tell you a little bit about our efforts. We started in 2003, and the goal was to raise funds for families that couldn't afford to send their campers to camp. And so we raise funds, and we call them camperships. And this year we were able to give out 23,725, that number, in camperships. And then we also, since 2003, have increased our fundraising efforts and also donate to the city to provide supplies for camp. So we're going to show a quick little video about camp, and then we have a check to present to you all.
Every day is an adventure at Camp PAHA.
Big smile.
The 7-week full-day summer camp for young people with disabilities fills a huge need for many families.
Even though we have a daughter with special needs, we still have the same question at the beginning of every summer when school comes out is, what are we going to do with her all summer long?
If Amy didn't go to Camp PAHA, she probably would spend more time watching television than she should. I also think she'd be very lonely as well.
For many, Camp PAHA is life-changing. It's the difference between a summer spent stuck in the house and a summer spent making new memories.
And my daughter comes home every day from camp with amazing stories. She's laughing, she's having a great time, and so it's meant a lot to our family.
I like Camp PAHA because I get to meet a lot of friends.
I love just hanging out with the kids because they are just so happy, just so much joy. Just seeing them smile. That's the one-on-one conversations that you get with the kids. It makes my day every day.
I think it's just seeing the smiles on their faces. It's super awesome when they're just having a good time, and you can tell that they're having a good time, and you know that you're being part of that, and you're helping them have the summer camp experience that they want.
Here, the focus is on abilities, not disabilities.
Camp PAHA had more field trips, more fun, and basically people that will understand you a lot more.
All right, Sophie, let's go. Oh, we're bouncing.
Some are as adventurous as the imagination. Others provide a serene connection to nature. Whatever the activity, no one is left on the sidelines.
It's a safe environment where they're getting all their needs met, which few places can provide all the things that we can as far as needs.
I'm just going to take your temperature real quick.
And we have nursing staff and all those things that really give parents the confidence that we can care for their child to the best of our abilities.
They just get to do everything that everybody else does at summer camp, and they come home with great memories and great stories to share about their summer and what they got to do.
After identifying the need to foster skills and independence in young adults transitioning out of the school system, the PAHA Adults in Transition program was added to focus on developing young adults into active members of their community. Called PAHA Adults in Transition, or PAT for short. It provides the same summer fun with a focus on skills. It's perfect for young adults like Amy.
The staff is great about keeping her on task and focusing her on some of the goals that have been established for her.
But no matter the age, campers find a summer of recreation, exploration, and new experiences.
It's just a camp where kids just get to be themselves, enjoy themselves, have fun, learn new things, do every activity you could ever imagine.
Camp PAHA gets a big boost of support from the nonprofit volunteer board called Friends of PAHA. It raises approximately $45,000 each year for PAHA programs. About half goes to camperships for families in need, the other half for supplies.
So not only does the board provide funds for kids who can't go to camp, we also provide awareness to the community that this camp exists and that these people, these families who have difficulty sometimes getting through the summer with those children, they can come to camp, they get out of the house, parents are free to go to work and, attend to all the responsibilities that they have.
The joy of giving is repaid with unlimited smiles.
I've never really had the opportunity to give back to the community, and so when this came, the opportunity came to me, and I found out it was about raising funds for kids for summer camp, I was sold.
It's all about enriching lives.
Hello, future world.
Providing social connections, reaching for challenges, and just plain making summer memories.
You guys got a rocket. Ah, crazy. Ready? Move it.
For campers, parents, and staff members alike, Camp PAHA scores success stories every summer, one child at a time.
Can you get in there? Yeah, like that.
For more information or to register as a camper, go online to lakewood.org/PAHA or call 303-987-4866. To help support a camper, check out friendsofpaha.org or give them a call at 303-987-7146. Camp PAHA is just one of many programs offered through the City of Lakewood's RISE program. For additional year-round opportunities, go online to lakewood.org/rise.
So that's a little bit about camp, and we have a nice check to donate to all of the city here tonight. Take a picture. Or lots of pictures.
Well, that's fantastic. There's just 43,725. You're amazing. Thank you all very much.
Do another one with
Yes.
all
Yes,
real
yes,
quick?
yes.
Everybody in together. Great, thank you. Paparazzi. That's great. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take a couple. Great. Thank you.
So before you leave, don't go yet, because I just want to actually mention a couple things. And since I've been on council, it just warms my heart to be able to be part of this night and to see what you do. And you actually have a fundraiser every year called SIP.
Savor and support.
SIP, Savor, and Support. And I purchased a piece of artwork for the city there last year. And this was done by some of your campers, and it is one of the best pieces that we have. So it's very cool. But more importantly, what I heard is enrichment, safety, fun, and respite for parents or guardians. And that's so important. I've learned a lot about that, whether it's the Seniors Resource Center or Camp Paha, just to give parents a break and to know that their loved one is safe. So thank you all so much for taking care of our special ones in the community, and they have so much fun and they're amazing. So let them know that we're really excited, and thank you for your support and for the check. It's great. Thanks.
You're next.
Okay, so we will now move on to our next item, which will be public comment. There'll be public comment pertaining to the Lakewood Development Dialogue at the beginning right now, and then after the presentation by Planning Commission and City Council. So first on my list, I have Jerry Coffey.
Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Jerry Coffey, and I'm here tonight. I sent each of you a PDF file of an ordinance from June 9th of 2003 that was passed. I was involved with it at the time, and many of in our neighborhood was. And what I am asking City Council, the city attorney, the city manager, I also sent them a copy, is to take a look at this and to acknowledge that it is a valid ordinance and that it will be enforced. That is the basic premise of it. It's about colleges and universities not being allowed in residential areas. And it describes student living units, it describes a definition. It was signed by Mayor Burkholder, all of the city council. The attorney at the time was Roger Noonan. Frank Gray was in the planning area, and the entire planning commission also jumped in on it. So a lot of thought was put into it by a lot of intelligent people. The city of Lakewood signed off on it, and today I'm asking that you all enforce it.
Thank you. Mr. Mingle. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jim Mingle. I'm a resident of the Belmar community. And I wanted to speak just briefly about what it has meant to me to live in Lakewood and live in Belmar particularly. My wife and I moved to Belmar 7 years ago. We moved from Ken Carroll Ranch in southern Jefferson County, where we had been for 25 years or so, and it was a community we loved, but we decided we wanted to find a walk-around community. That was our first goal. The search was tough in the Denver community. There weren't a lot of places to look at. We looked at a Golden, which we liked very much, but there are very few properties available there. We looked at Stapleton. We looked at Stapleton at a time where it hadn't developed very much, and it didn't seem like much of a walk-around community. And as I've watched it develop, as nice as it is, we made the best choice in coming to Belmar, a place we really didn't know much about. And we very much we live in a condominium building right on the plaza. It's and the idea of a walk-around community was to be close to shops, to be close to restaurants, to be close to the doctor, and it's made a big impact on our lives. Interestingly, well, the number one impact I think is well, we had 2 cars. We have 1 now. We put about 7,000 miles a year on it, so our footprint is low. The amount of time we spend commuting is reduced, and the amount of time we spend using public transportation has increased. The one thing that was a surprise to us when we moved here is we really weren't looking for a community of friends, but we found it. And it's interesting, we lived in a classic suburban setting, and we knew people immediately on our street. We knew people through our children, but as our children grew and left schools, that number reduced. We moved to Belmar, and the number of friends that we have developed, just because of the density and proximity, has increased tenfold, and it's a wonderful feeling. We like the diversity and of the community, and interestingly, there's one factor about diversity that isn't often thought of. But as you age, we wanted a diversity of age. We did not want to move to a community of everyone with the same color of hair as we have. And we found that, and that has been a real plus. So I'm here to thank the City of Lakewood for creating Belmar, and I think if you had other opportunities to create similar communities, you'd find a tremendous demand and of people that would contribute to the community and have a smaller footprint, if you will. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Ms. Judson?
I'd like to share my time with Carol Baum. I'm only going to say two things. First of all, I appreciate all of you and your public service very much for being willing to be here countless hours and to do what is in your conscience for the city of Lakewood. I appreciate that. And I just want to say that I hope that we can preserve the character of Lakewood with enough open spaces. A lot of the reasons that we moved here, I hope that we can amicably set limits on multifamily housing density. Hope that we can set some limits so that Lakewood is still, you know, a beautiful place, the place that we wanted when we first moved here. So I hope you'll consider that. And then I'd like to give the rest of my time to Carol Baum.
So we don't cede time, but she can certainly have. Remember, we'll have a public comment period afterward as well. Do you want to wait? Okay. All right. So that is it for the first part. So we will now go into our presentation. So this got started a few months ago, and the Planning Commission, by our charter, is tasked with weighing in on land use issues. And so you all took it upon yourself with great eagerness to want to jump in and start to address this. So we thank you for that. And it started with 3 public hearings or open houses in September or October. And now you've been starting to take that information that you have received. And tonight you're going to be here to give us an update on your process and some of the things that you're thinking about, and then what it looks like from here on out as we continue. So with that, I will turn over to the chair, Mr. Henry Hollander.
Thank you. How do we get the screen? Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. We thank you for inviting us tonight to discuss a topic that's been discussed within the city of Lakewood recently, and that is the land development. And I want to talk about the process that the Planning Commission is undertaking to address some of the issues in the current zoning ordinance. As you may know, as the mayor mentioned, on August 7th, we had a joint session with City Council. At that joint session, we initiated a process to review and make recommendations to amend the zoning ordinance. The concerns we heard have been hearing from the public at our public hearings, and also at city council meetings. Primarily involve parking, sustainability requirements, building design, mixed-use design, housing diversity, residential limits, height transition, setback requirements, and building to open space ratios. Those seem to have generated the most concern. For simplicity and to start the process, we further broke those down into these categories: parking and related infrastructure, housing, mixed use, site design and community context, and architectural design and green buildings. So we, as part of this process, planning department set up a website, www.lakewoodtogether.org. Since it's been set up, it's been visited by 1,100 people. We started the meetings with 3 public house open houses in September. Then after that, we had a study session to review what we've been hearing at the open houses and online, and discussed how we should move forward. We started out, one of the issues that crops up, it wasn't specifically identified, but it crops up in certainly everything that we've seen, just about everything we've seen in the Planning Commission, and that's traffic. We were told time and time again, well, traffic is being addressed, and we never really understood what that meant. So we had a presentation by the traffic department, which I was pleasantly surprised in, and I am a civil engineer and have been involved with traffic issues all my career. I was pleasantly surprised with the way they do address traffic in the city. It's a difficult situation, but and then after that, we started our study sessions. We had a study session on mixed use on November 15th. There were 12 attendees there. We had a study session on building design. There were 5 attendees there. So that's what we've done so far. Before I turn it over, I'm going to have some of the other planning commissioners speak on specific subject areas. But before we get into that, one of the things that keeps cropping up is relates to what the Planning Commission is, what we do, and what we what our mission is. So I'd like to briefly explain that we are a volunteer commission made up of 7 members appointed by City Council. There's 1 representative from each ward and 2 at-large members. And we primarily conduct public hearings on rezoning and subdivision applications, and then we look at it mostly from a technical point of view and provide recommendations to City Council, and City Council ultimately decides whether the application will be approved or not. We are the approval authority in a few limited cases when most special uses or major waivers, things like that. For those hearings, we're quasi-judicial, just like you are. In other words, we can't have conversations about the case outside of the public hearing. We're also responsible for such things as preparing and updating the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinances, and in that capacity, we're not quasi-judicial. It's called legislative, and we are able to discuss it outside the meetings. What we don't do is grant public building permits, conduct design reviews, approve developments. We don't see cases like that. That's handled by the planning staff. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Commissioner Sulkowski to start talking about mixed use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. So I'm going to go over mixed use, which was our November 8th meeting. This is just information that we gathered from the study session. Obviously, we will have another follow-up public hearing, so this is nothing set in stone. This was just kind of after the results of that study session. As Henry mentioned, we had about 12 people attend. And the two items that we were discussing were to remove the discrepancies between the descriptions and regulations of mixed-use zones that's found in the zoning code. And then the second item was to review mixed-use standards and propose changes for mixed-use zones to ensure a successful use mix. And I'm just going to go over these really quickly because I know it's, I don't think we need to get into the specifics of it just now, but since it's not a formal recommendation to you all at this point. But basically, this is the change to the language in the zoning code. And I'll go ahead and read it. Mixed-use districts enable a range of land uses, including residential, commercial, and industrial uses, to be located in an integrated way that supports sustainable forms of transport, such as public transportation, walking, and cycling, and enhances neighborhood amenities. Mixed-use development can take the form of a single building, a city block, or entire neighborhoods. The general intent of each of the 5 mixed-use zone districts within the city is identified by the descriptions below. These statements are descriptive only in nature and do not regulate the use of land or buildings within each district. This is the description of mixed use in the code. Obviously, each zone has further description outlined in the zoning code, but this is just a revision to what the description of mixed use is in that section. And the second one is revising some of the language to say that mixed-use areas include a range of land uses, including residential, commercial, and industrial uses, to be located in an integrated way that supports sustainable forms of transport, such as public transportation, walking, and cycling, and enhances neighborhood amenities. Mixed-use development can take the form of a single building, a city block, or entire neighborhoods. And the intent of both of those recommendations is to remove any of the ambiguities in the code and make it very clear what our goal is for a mixed-use neighborhood. And the third recommendation is to really look at how we make our mixed-use zones into a mix of uses. And how do we guarantee that those mix of uses are what we want within the city of Lakewood? So the recommendation is to create and initiate a 3-step process based on complete neighborhood framework to define successful mixed use, map mixed use areas, and develop strategies to ensure successful mix of uses. So it's trying to really figure out what exactly we're looking for from our mixed use neighborhoods in the city. Because right now there's not anything that's measurable to achieve that, even though that is the overall goal of a mixed use neighborhood. So that sums up what we discussed for mixed use. And
thank you. And this came about, the two main problems that came out was the description of mixed use, or there was confusion as to what the code actually said about mixed use development. And there really is nothing in the code that makes sure that mixed use districts actually turn out to be mixed use districts, which we see as a problem, and presented are our solutions that we're gonna have public hearings on and amend as needed before we come with our formal recommendations to you. With that, I want to turn it over to Commissioner Sinks to talk about building design.
Hello, I'm Glenda Sinks from Ward 1. Congratulations to the new councilors and those that were reelected. And so this is again a time just to give you a little bit of a foundation and a reminder to all of us where we are in the process. So last week we had a study session on building design, and issues that rose to the top in the open houses and as well from you are represented here on these two bullets. And so as you see, it says there on the first bullet, new architectural regulations or a design review process. And so I'll tell you that recommendation that came out of that. And then the second bullet about sustainability requirements, and another commissioner will handle that. So we have two recommendations, and it's pretty exciting to think about how this can improve things. And so the recommendation is to create design guidelines for a pilot area within Lakewood and instate a design review committee for the pilot area. And of course, the council will decide that, will present, the recommendations and thoughts about what that pilot area would be and who would make up the committee. So all this is, again, the beginning of the process. So that's the first recommendation. And for the second recommendation is our newest commissioner, Alex Bartlett. Yeah.
Thank you. As Commissioner Sinks mentioned, the second recommendation from the building design study session last week was for planning staff to work with Public Works to update the building code to include a number of identified sustainability standards. Then the planning staff would continue to research a list of identified sustainability standards and revisit those during the next annual zoning update. So the recommendation here mentions a table, which you all cannot see, but there were a list of about 24 sustainability standards that would be considered for the building code.
Maybe.
With that, before I talk about the future meetings, I wanted to talk a little more about the traffic session we have, and for that I'm going to have Commissioner Edie talk about that.
If you just want to forward the slide, that'd be good. So the original, the original intent, or what was coming back from council on August 7th was this wasn't on the agenda. So we have not made any recommendations on traffic. It's kind of not our purview, but we did learn a few things. We had a hearing with John Payton and Jay Hutchinson, who's the Director of Public Works for the City of Lakewood, and we concluded that no one likes traffic. But no, seriously, traffic is an increasing problem in the Denver metro area. There's no doubt about it. Nobody's blind. Anybody who drives a car can see it every day. So what we learned on that session, we didn't make any recommendations, as I mentioned. We just asked lots of questions, and we learned how zoning changes by themselves do not trigger traffic studies. Traffic studies are important, and I think it's going on in Union Corridor to do traffic counts, and we got those numbers. If you're interested, won't bore you with the details. We also learned that traffic generation does not determine whether a development project will be allowed or not, because of right of use, etc. City of Lakewood has very cohesive coordination with all the major entities that involve traffic, like Federal Highways, CDOT, Dr. Cog, etc. And we try to build our plans with a bigger picture in mind, so traffic can flow throughout the metro region. The city has cutting-edge technology in place. However, we don't have budgets, or budgets are limited that don't allow us just yet to have things like smart lights. Has anybody heard of smart lights before? They're in the city of Philadelphia. They're very successful. It's all like Internet of Things and measuring flow of traffic throughout the city and using big data analytics to control the traffic. It would be great to have that, but it costs a ton of money. Something else we learned, gas prices don't affect traffic. So you can make gas $1 a gallon or $3 a gallon. The traffic, what's the biggest driver of traffic, forgive the pun, is employment. And so single occupancy of vehicles, of course, take up a lot of space and generate a lot of traffic. So more people in a car would be great to ease capacity. And I asked, is capacity okay currently in the city of Lakewood? The thought is it's just okay at the moment. You know, we're seeing a big pinch. And as development occurs, what's interesting is traffic is actually mitigated in the process because more collector streets are added, arteries are widened, and roads fall into place as the city develops that mitigate the traffic congestion. And one last question I asked, and to the Public Works Director, I said, if you were king for a day kind of thing, what would you do as a planner to mitigate traffic if you were controlling zoning code and things like that? And the most successful, the thing that probably generates more traffic in the city than anything else is the old notion of Euclidean planning, where you have everybody living in one place, single detached homes in one zone of the city, and then employment on the other side of the city. What would mitigate traffic the most would be more mixed-use zoning, nodal type development, where we heard about walkable neighborhoods, proximity to housing. That would ease traffic more than anything else in terms of zoning and planning. And that wraps it up for me.
Thank you. So, where are we going from here? We still have study sessions to hold on site design, which is December 13th, and we're looking at things such as researching ways to encourage and incentivize amenities usable by pedestrians, review proposed changes to height transition requirements. I think we ought to take a little look at height requirements in general, but it's going to focus on the transition because that seems to be where the biggest problem is. Bulk plane and build-to requirements. There's been a lot of complaints on that. Changes to sidewalk and streetscape requirements, sustainability, and other such things. One of the things that came up in our mixed use, we kept bringing things up that, we need to look at this, we need to look at that. A lot of those will be looked at in site design session. Then our next one after that, January 10th, is going to be parking. Parking, other than traffic, parking probably has been the thing I heard most about problems on when you talk about development. So we're going to look at the multifamily parking requirements, the restaurant parking requirements, and things like that. There are a few sustainability things we're looking at also. Housing is going to be the final session, subject session, in January 24th. We're going to research ways to encourage and require affordable housing throughout Lakewood. Look at the limits on the number of units allowed, and issues such as that are brought up, ADUs. So anyway, when we're done with that, I asked for another study session in early February, just to make sure some of these are interrelated, and I want to make sure that we've looked at these from all sides. I mean, you even heard testimony tonight about the difference of opinion as to how the city should move forward. Fortunately, it's part of the beauty of Lakewood. We're a diverse community. What's appropriate in one area of the city may or may not be appropriate in other areas. And those are some of the things that have come up in our discussions when we came up with our recommendations so far. Then we will start scheduling the public hearings, the Planning Commission public hearings, where we actually come up with the formal recommendations to City Council, and then it's turn it over to you. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to adopt these things. Our responsibility is to dream them up, and your responsibility is to let us know, or let the city know, what you feel is a good idea or a bad idea. With that, are there any questions?
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. And I imagine with this bunch, we're going to have a few questions. So, just want to mention a couple things. Clearly, I appreciate all the work that has been done, and this is a heavy lift. And starting with some of the mixed use regulations and how that's been applied or what that looks like has been a really complicated one. And I know when you go to peer communities throughout the nation, nothing's uniformed. And the idea of how do you attract, what that balance is, what are the metrics, that was really interesting to hear. How are we even gauging that? So to have that understanding of where we're going to go with that. Potentially, if there's that table for sustainability topics, if that's something that we could check out, that'd be probably helpful. And then design review, we do have a couple examples throughout the city where we do that. The Rooney Valley has, higher design standards than the rest of the city, as does Belmar, and I think Colorado Mills, Denver West area. So that's something that's not completely new, but that's interesting to hear. And I think there's some neighborhoods who'd probably want to jump on that. So with that, before I turn it over to questions, I'll just make one comment. I'll say, be bold. This is an opportunity for us to really take a look at this. Second time, could take a third time, but let's be bold. Let's really go out there and try to find ways to make things unique and better and meaningful. So thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you very much. Great work, guys. I really appreciate all that you're doing, and I am very sad to hear that we didn't have very many people attending the open houses, because I know when I walked and knocked, your issues that you're dealing with were the major concerns of practically everybody I knocked on their doors. So I'm really sad that you didn't get more people attending. We'll have to figure out maybe at our ward meetings, after you kind of get some more information, invite you there. I know what bulk plane means. I know what setbacks mean, and I know what build to means, but we've got a lot of people that are listening tonight on TV that this is a new language that they don't understand. So Henry, could I ask you to translate, please?
I'm gonna ask for a little assistance from our planning director, Travis. I can explain it, but I think he can explain it better.
Good evening, Travis Parker. So we have a requirement in some of our zone districts, especially the transit zone districts, for a build to requirement. And that basically means the building may be no further back than X feet from the street or from the back of the sidewalk. Bulk plane has to do with that front plane of the building. So in some instances, the first stories can be close and then they have to be stepped back from there. How much of that bulk can be right up against the street? And was there a third one that I missed?
The setbacks.
So setbacks are just how far a building must be from its property lines, front, rear, side, how far it has to be from its neighboring properties.
So to add to that, one of the things that we hear from a lot of people as again, walking and knocking, they're not crazy about the idea of having buildings right up to the sidewalk. They want more space between the sidewalk and possibly the road. I think those people that have that concern, I'm really going to encourage you to attend that session on December 13th, because this is your opportunity to talk with the people and have some input. I think the other, I'm sorry.
Yes, and there's discussion of the build-to zone is what you're talking about. It's an urban concept, and it works at places like Belmar very well, and the people there like it. Those of us who live in other places go there and tend to be a little claustrophobic.
And I think that's the part, is that as long as you understand the language, then you can come and be part of the discussion.
That's what we're going to be looking at the next session.
Perfect. That's the other thing. And may I also, and I don't know how to do this, but I am infatuated by tiny homes. I don't know how they can be looked at. We may never want to do them in the city of Lakewood, but can I throw that out there as a pipe dream somewhere? Thank you.
Thank you. Tiny homes. Ms. Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I actually hope to one day own a tiny home as an extra home. But anyways, moving on. Really wanted to dig through and to see more about traffic. I'm sure that the traffic piece focused on volume and timing of lights and some of those types of things, but wanted to understand whether any of the traffic studies that have been done or are future looking have thought about looking at the impacts of distracted driving, basically driving behavior, and how that's starting to alter the flow of traffic. Because not only do we have more traffic, we have people leaving the line later because they're checking a text or an email, and they're switching lanes. And I think that's starting to overlay on top of the congestion. And so I'm looking for, if we're looking at those studies, are we also looking at the behaviors and how we can look to alter the behaviors to keep eyes on the roads, and what that cost of enforcement may look like? How do we encourage efficient use of the roads? Is there technological solutions that we can put in place? Can we work with our businesses to ease the rush hours? And I don't say rush hour anymore because it doesn't last an hour. How can we ease those? I think we really do, as Mayor Paul said, we need to really start thinking outside of there, because we're not going to be able to address the full scope unless we understand that there's a lot of things that are factoring into not only the traffic, but the frustration of people in traffic. And as someone who's been in nearly 2 accidents within the last 3 weeks, for people, I look up in my rearview mirror and see people looking with the top of their head, and it's like, please, people, eyes on road when you're coming up behind me. So I wanted to throw those out as some things and see if you had discussed any of those before I ask my second question.
Well, we haven't had our we did have our session on traffic, and again, that was an informational. Most of the issues you brought up there are really under the purview of the traffic section, which is under Public Works. And but having said that, planning is an important part of. I mean, traffic planning is an important part of what we should be looking at in the city, and some of those issues certainly warrant consideration when we are planning.
Well, thank you.
And so, one of the things that I brought up that shouldn't traffic be a separate area where we would look at these things in more depth, and what we kind of the conclusion we came to was, well, traffic is part of a lot of what we consider. So what I said, and that's one reason for the study session after the initial rounds, is there anything else we want to look at? We're looking at zoning ordinance changes, but I wouldn't be afraid to recommend further studies, but that's going to get into things that cost money that, you know, you're responsible for budgeting and things like that. So
well, thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
It does, but what I would like to encourage us to do is to not look at these things siloed anymore. I don't think we can. I don't think we can just look at Public Works and say, well, you take care of timing and that, and then, because we've got police enforcement aspects that cost money. We've got, you know, our business, our economic development, trying to encourage things. So I think that we're going to, if we're going to really solve problems in a meaningful way, we have to look at gathering the information and then kind of munging it together, and then bringing others together to say, where are those pieces and where are those tentacles? So I think that it's definitely multi-pronged, and I appreciate all the work that you guys have put in so far. The only other thing I wanted to comment about is on the mixed use. I do agree with clarification. I'm very attuned to making sure we protect neighborhoods that have been impacted by that overlay zoning that came in. And what I'm hearing a lot from folks is really paying attention to transition zones. If the property's not big enough to support that, then maybe it has to be a single story or two story to integrate. But to have these new developments going in that basically you have something just like popping up out of there and just standing, that's not acceptable to folks, and they're really starting to feel the pressure of losing sunlight, losing the ability to garden, you know, those types of things, which really impact not only their property of value, but literally their quality of life. As a gardener, if you were to put something 3 stories behind me, I would literally lose one of the most enjoyable things that I do. So I think we have to really look hard at how do we transition and what kind of creative ways can we find to do bigger transition zones where people don't feel something's looming over them. So I just wanted to throw that out as well.
We did discuss some of that in the mixed use, but as far as the recommendations that are going to come out of it, we're going to address in the next session, because the transition zones aren't just a problem with mixed use. It's some of the other zones too.
Well said. I learned a new word, munging. Munging. Thank you. Ms. Vincent.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, and I think it goes into with the whole mixed use and tiny homes. Could we look also too at micro apartments? There's been some discussion among some of the hotels as maybe changing some of those into small tiny apartments. And also to give some weight or some consideration, or how may we integrate historical properties. We have old sections of Lakewood, we have new sections of Lakewood, and as we start looking at those, because some of the transition pieces will be a conglomeration of things that are out there, from single story to apartments to hotels to historical properties. So to kind of consider all those things. And then a question that I had is, you had 1,100 visits to the site, is that correct?
Yes.
And then, so the 88 participants, those were 88 comments then that you had that were unique?
I had some figures that we had about 300, and I'm not sure. Travis, you came up with that number. Can you explain that number a little better?
So yeah, the site itself had 1,100 visitors. There were, that 300 number were people that spent time on the individual issue pages, and then there were 88 unique participants. So a lot more than 88 comments. A lot of people left comments on multiple pages, multiple issues, but 88 unique commenters.
All right, that rolled up into the 300 comments and 100 visits. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Abel.
I have a few things. First, I'll follow up on what Councilwoman Vincent was saying about the number of participants. I was surprised that the numbers weren't higher, but we also had, over the last couple of years, there was a round table, Mr. Parker, Ward 1 neighborhood representatives who brought to you their ideas on mixed use, especially along Colfax. There have been dozens of people at dozens of meetings and city council chambers telling us what they expect along the lines of mixed use and other things that are addressed here. Were those quantified in this compilation of information?
Those aren't in the numbers that were in this screen, but certainly a lot of those discussions are represented in the outcomes.
Okay.
We talked about things like design review and things that are coming out in the recommendations from the Planning Commission.
And then to traffic studies, we, I guess, cannot make a decision on any particular development with a traffic study that reflects cumulative figures from a number of developments. But it does seem to me that it would be very helpful to council to see a traffic study or traffic updates on regular basis to know where we are in this. For instance, when the Federal Center was rezoned or was annexed into the city, the traffic study wasn't available at the time, but soon after that we had a general traffic study that said that the intersections around the Federal Center were at F capacity. I think that's failure rate or the lowest rate of usage or of drivability, whatever. But I think it would give us a good idea of what we're looking at as we address development in the city as a whole. Are we, when we're looking at these regulations, looking at the differences required in open space in different mixed use areas and different mixed uses? If you have a completely residential multifamily building in multifamily, it requires 30% open space, I believe. But if you have a single-use residential and mixed-use employment, for instance, doesn't that drop down to about half that open space requirement, which means that a developer can put in more units in each development in a non-multifamily zone district?
That was discussed in our mixed-use study session.
Right.
And we expect to make a recommendation on that to help fix that situation.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Mr. Hollander. Let's see. Ms. Harrison had urged people to speak up at the December 13th Planning Commission study session. Does the Planning Commission take public comment at study sessions?
No, we do not.
So how do we enable Ms. Harrison's suggestion?
We've had discussions about that. We've had public input online. We've had a public input at the open houses. We're all volunteer. We have limited time. The fact that we're now having study sessions every other week, if we took, we have a lot, we're looking at these from all sides and in depth. I mean, we had a 2-hour conversation on building design that, you know, the people in the audience started nodding off when they were, but we have to do that. That's why we're having these study sessions. I've asked people to, you know, listen to what we're saying and comment online. Come and talk to us later, and some of them did that. And you know, we're interested in what everybody has to say, but we have to. We're the technical recommenders. We kind of have to weigh, because when we hear from the public, we there's such a diversity of what we're hearing, and we have to try and make sense of it with our knowledge of the process and come to you recommendations.
Beginning in February, there will be public hearings on each and every one of these issues. So there will be actual public hearings.
I appreciate it. My concern was on the night of December 13th. If a bunch of folks show up expecting to talk and they can't talk, I don't want them to feel that they're being excluded. So,
we want to hear from, just not that night, because especially with the site design session.
I understand, and I know that y'all are taking on a huge load here, and it is taking you away from home and family and other diversions. So I appreciate the effort you're putting into this and all the time for each of you. I would like to remind folks that as we put in the study session in which we decided to put you to this task, we expressed the consensus that we would like to see the work of those dozens of people who spend hundreds of hours over 3 years compiling this zoning ordinance, to see their vision embraced and not changed. So if y'all would work toward what seems to be their intent and visions, we would appreciate that. At least I would. I can't speak for all of us. And the cause for concern has been iterated, especially in mixed use. The single use and mixed use seems to be a large concern. And I am hoping that we will remediate that cause of concern as opposed to finding ways to justify it. I do like the idea that Ms. Franks mentioned about remembering the transition zones and how it affects people's use in their backyards, gardening or whatever. I saw a mention of remapping zoning mixed use areas, or maybe all zoning commercial, or can you enlighten me on that, Henry?
Are you talking about changing specific zones?
I just saw a brief mention, I believe, in one of the slides about possible remapping of mixed use areas or
one of the things that we've noticed is there are complaints around some of the mixed use, some of the development in mixed use. We do want to take a look at, there have been several property areas that when this process is done, I want to make sure we look at those to the extent, okay, what are the problems with these, and should we look at possibly rezoning them legislatively?
Thank you for that. I've had discussions with the city manager about a similar thing, and I have a list of some sites in Ward 1 I'll be happy to provide for you when you get to
we got to be careful there, because we are dealing with property
absolutely
rights issues, and if we're not very careful and really study these before we change them, we could open a can of worms and
I understand.
Spend too much time in court.
Especially if something has an application in the process. I believe until that point, there are any property subject to zoning changes, including mine. Mine was rezoned in 13. I do like the idea that you're going to look at ways to acquire a larger stock of affordable housing. And good luck with that, but whatever we can do to support that effort, I think we should.
Well, like traffic, if we had all the money in the world, we could solve all the problems real quick.
Well, it's your wallet we're looking at getting into, so.
Cut taxes too when we solve
There
it.
you go. We'll give you more and charge you less. And I agree that tiny homes offers a possible solution for downsizing for older folks, or maybe even for entry level for younger couples, or for folks who just don't look to ever have a larger house. So there are a lot of these things that are that could be part of a solution for affordable housing, and I appreciate y'all looking at that very much, and I appreciate all the time and effort you put into it and all the time you put into just listening to me right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Skilling.
Thank you, Mayor. So I am going to take the mayor's advice as well and be bold. So I kind of had a misunderstanding, perhaps, which is my fault, about what tonight was. I understood that maybe we'd get into some of the weeds on the MES issues. And from where I sit tonight, I don't even think we've arrived at the forest yet, unfortunately. So let me be bold and say that I think we need to keep sight on why this is even an issue. And I can speak from my ward as to why this is an issue, and Charlie just spoke, Mr. Abel just spoke to it. The problem that we see so far is the implementation. I read the zoning code and the MES and the other mixed pieces in this, and I think I've mentioned this to some of you all when I attended the commission study session on this, that it's an implementation issue. I read the zoning to say that mixed means mixed, and unfortunately, the projects that are being proposed aren't mixed, they're single. So just as Councilperson Abel just mentioned, we have an implementation issue. That's the problem. How do we fix that? The recommendations that were on the slides and the strike-throughs and the adding new language about integrated ways that support sustainable forms of transport, such as public transportation, walking and cycling, and those types of things, I don't think solves any ambiguity. The problem is people are reading this and they're trying to figure out, well, there's a mixed use zone next to my house or next to my business, and they want to know, what does that mean? And they see either a single use go up and say, well, that's not mixed. So if we want to talk about ratios and how we come up with those types of things, I think we should do that. How are we going to come up with something that is more than just saying it's mixed? Is it going to be, if it's an employment, does that mean that it's 50-50? Does that mean that somebody can come to you and say, I've got a 10% office space, but then I've got 90% residential? Is that okay in this code? Those are the issues we need to look at, in my opinion. Adding more language that I see proposed is not going to solve this problem. And again, this isn't a knock on any of you guys. I mean, you guys are working hard. I was at your study session. You guys put a lot of work in this. I'm just saying, from where I sit and trying to solve the problems from our constituents, that's the type of stuff that they're worried about. So, you had said, Mr. Hollander, that there was going to be a recommendation of some kind on this single-use issue. I believe you had just said that you guys were working on some recommendation on that. Did I mishear that?
Well, we came up with recommendations. I mean, the clarification of the wording is only one part of what the recommendations were.
Okay.
We're also recommending a suggested way of addressing the problem that mixed-use zones are not being developed necessarily as mixed-use zones. We've got information from other municipalities. I know I came from Wheat Ridge, was on the planning commission there when they were looking at these issues. and have similar problems. So I went to talk to the planners over there and asked them, do you really have any way to, you have anything in the code that you've been successful in making sure that mixed-use zones are? And they mentioned they've been incentivizing, but they haven't had a lot of success with that. So, that's not one of the things we recommend. There's all kinds of ways to address this. You can go back to the concept of PUDs. I mean, that's how Belmar was developed as a planned development, and that's a way to solve the problem. Except that can only come about if a landowner or a bunch of landowners get together and say and propose the PUD. And so what do you do about the properties that there isn't a developer? The other thing is that I think we should be encouraging more small landowners, small businesses be involved in the mixed use, and if you approach it with PUDs or some of these other suggestions have been made, you end up with only the big out-of-state investors having enough money to do this. We want some of the local money, some of the people who are vested in the community involved with the process. So that's why we came up with the recommended approach that we have, and we're suggesting that we come up with a process to end up with mixed use zones that are truly mixed use.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I guess I'll just circle back to when I read in things like mixed use employments zones, it says that there will be ancillary retail and residential uses. And you combine that with the definition of mixed, which is stricken on this proposal, but I think we all know what mix means. So you got a mix. And then you've got a legal definition or even a common sense definition of ancillary. So we can kind of come up with a common sense. If we look at a mixed use zone and we see a single use, we could all agree that's not a mixed use. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think the zoning, what everyone spent a whole heck of a lot of time doing for a long time and getting this thing together, it's pretty clear on what the mixed is. Now we just have to be clearer on some of the ambiguities, but those ambiguities are, okay, is there a ratio to the mix? And if somebody does come with 10% employment and 90% residential, is that okay? But to say that single use is somehow allowable in a mixed use zone, I'm not proposing that we throw out this mixed use concept. So those are some of my ideas. And like I said, maybe I just kind of misunderstood where we're at in the process. Hopefully we can get further along with this, because I think the recommendations that are put forth, while admirable, as the mayor said, being bold, I don't think that really addresses the issues that the people are having. And my last point would be, I noted that the city council public hearings are set to begin in April. Now, I recall there was some talk about maybe doing these things piecemeal, that you would bring them to us in a piecemeal fashion. Do you guys recall that from your commission study session?
Yeah, I mean, we may, well, it's become obvious to us that we're not going to be able to handle all the recommendations at once, because they're too complicated.
Can I ask that you guys or somebody talk about, instead of waiting till the beginning of April to start hearings on MES, since we're all talking about it, we've got momentum, can we just, as you guys get further on these recommendations, just bring them? We got February, we got January if you want. We can come talk about these things as they come up. Because if we wait for April just to start the hearings, I mean, what are we, 5-6 months out before we get movement on this thing? And then it's, we got to do first reading, second reading, all of these issues. That's a lot of stuff. So I propose, and site design and parking and all that stuff is super important, but as far as these MES, as you guys make these recommendations. Can you just bring them back sooner? So that's all I have.
Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for all of your hard work. I really appreciate it. And I think that you have captured and have talked about a lot of the issues that I'm hearing from our community. So thank you very much. And also do appreciate the effort to work on clarifying the mixed use, as I will not go into because that was just very much discussed. But I do want to ask you a little bit about, I think that you mentioned that you were going to do a 3-step process to start really looking into how can we define and make these measurable so that it's not up to interpretation. So to aid with implementing, I think you said, a successful mix. So have you already started to define what that process is, that 3-step process?
Well, that's going to have to be a process that is developed and approved with City Council. Right now, where we're at is the recommendation to come up with the specifics of this process. It's a complex problem. I mean, we're not the only community that's wrestling with it. We're not the only community that's looking at mixed use and wrestling with the problem. I mean, the simplistic solution is have every building in the mixed use zone mixed use, but in practicality, it doesn't work that way. What you need is a mixed use zone that has the mix of uses within the zone. Belmar, for example, there's only 2 mixed-use buildings in Belmar, but yet the community as a whole is a mixed-use community. And that's what we need to strive for, that we have. There's 2 problems. We have to strive to make that happen in the mixed-use zones. And then the second problem is, are some of these zones zone mixed use and they shouldn't be. So those, when this process is done, those are 2 problems I want to have addressed. Now, there's been some talk of the schedule. In some ways, this is a long drawn-out schedule, and things are going to come in and under the current code, and so there's an urgency to change these. But if we change it and create other problems, we haven't done anything, and maybe hurt what we're trying to do as a city.
So I think that's helpful. Thank you. And I think Belmar is always the example I use when I think about mixed use too, because the whole neighborhood is mixed, but not every single building. And we have a lot of apartment buildings that are not mixed. So there might not be a coffee shop in every building. And there's a lot of townhomes that don't have mixed use, but the whole neighborhood is mixed. So to me, I think I'm hoping that we'll get to a point where we clarify the area that we're defining has to be mixed, and then so just so that it's concrete and easy for people to understand what that means. And then the other thing was about integrating into the neighborhood, the existing neighborhoods. And this is another thing I hear a lot from our community is, I think Councilor Franks mentioned about height. That's something that people feel very strongly about. And then other things that have come up for me is the landscaping. So as we integrate into the neighborhood, and then design and how the architectural design matches or doesn't match with the existing neighborhood can help it integrate more into that existing neighborhood. Which brings me to my next question, was the architectural standards. I'm really excited about this process that you guys are thinking of, and doing the having a pilot and looking at standards, and then having a group to do design review. are you looking at having citizens being on that group? Okay.
Yes, we didn't really get into the specific recommendation, but what we're talking about, and this may change before it comes to you, is having one citizen in a five, have 5 members, have some design experts, an architect, and then that sort of thing, a representative from the city, and then a citizen. And the only problem with that is, okay, if you have a citizen from Belmar and they're dealing with issues in Green Mountain, how's that going to work? Well, we came up with a concept of having a roving. It depends on where it is. You would have one citizen from this area and another citizen from the other area when you're looking at that area. So again, the specifics need to be worked on, but that's the concept that we're working towards.
I love that. And while you're playing, if you were queen for a day or mayor for a day, whatever it was, I would love to see that have each area get to have a citizen representative, because so much, our different parts of Lakewood are so different. So Colfax is so different from Green Mountain, and I think having input into what your neighborhood looks like would be very meaningful for people. And I think that is all that I had for you. So thank you again very much for your hard work. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Mr. Beta?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, let me say, as the new guy on the block, thank you very much for your service, for your hard work. Excuse me. I know that this is a lot of work. It's complicated, and I'm myself figuring that out, and so I really appreciate all the hard work that you're putting into it. I want to echo Councilman Skilling's remarks, however, and let me just say it this way: time is of the essence. From my time out in the campaign and talking to people, they want to see some things change, and they're looking for that soon. I'm not sure that we have the luxury of waiting until April to start talking about hearings on a comprehensive program. And so I would say to you is, if you can identify some things that are obvious that we can do, that are non-controversial, maybe things that are get the ball rolling piecemeal, that might be really helpful to show our citizens that we are serious about making changes and doing them as soon as we can. So that's all.
Thank you. During your conversations about mixed use, was there anything about financing? And some of the things that we've heard where mixed use struggles is to be financed, and the idea of financing, commercial and residential at the same time, and what that looks like and what those effects are, and how other communities are somewhat more successful. And I think in your urban cores, you're going to have more of that push. And when you're in more of a suburban environment, it might be more challenging. But did that come up in the conversations?
Not that I recall. Does anybody else?
The only thing I would mention, Mr. Mayor, was that I have an impression, this is kind of personal to me, that overall in the metro area, there's presently a surplus of retail space. And that I at least raised, because we're in a mixed use. You're expected to have a certain amount of retail. You want it within walking distance and with easy access. And I wanted to bring that up because you do see in some of the newer structures in Denver that I've observed that a lot of that ground level retail space is not occupied, at least not yet. So that's just a thought out there.
Absolutely. Find that balance. Mr. Abel?
Just a couple of follow-up remarks. I would like to address Mr. Cohn's remark there. I've been doing a lot of driving around, not only in Denver, but other areas in the metro area, and I see a lot of mixed-use construction going on. Not all of it's for retail. There's service, there's office. There are a number of other uses for mixed use, galleries, probably some vocational use, that sort of thing. And I agree with Mr. Skilling and Mr. Beta that we need to get started. We've been talking about this for 2 years, trying to get to the point we're at now, and that took 2 years. So I would rather see us, I don't want to move too hastily. I do appreciate your remark, Mr. Hollander, about creating more problems than we have now. But I think it's time we get started. And if we can do these things one piece at a time, that I think that will work. I would like to see us do associated pieces like site design and architecture. Those two things would go together well, and we're hearing about one now, and we'll hear another later. But as Mr. Beta said, time is of the essence. People have been concerned about this for far too long, and we need to give them some answers. So,
we did discuss at our last session how we might accelerate things, and we came to the conclusion we want to get through the site design study session and before we recommend whether we're going to move forward, because there's some things we're looking at there that may affect what we're looking at in mixed use.
I think we need to get with it then, because mixed use is the biggest issue we're going to address. Thank you.
I think if I can jump in.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Dale Miller. And to add to Commissioner Cohn's comment, in a couple of the cases that have come to us, I think we as a group, and I know I've asked questions about mixed use, because I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think everyone on the Planning Commission is thinks about mixed use. And so I will ask questions of someone like proposing a storage unit where they're required to have some retail or some sort of commercial space, and ask what they're going to do with that. And they most of the time what they have said, as an example, is that they don't really care that much about it. They have to have it, so they're going to have something there, but that they don't make money on that space. And the same is true, for example, at Solterra, when we were talking about with those folks one time, asking questions about commercial properties being built, or because they have the option to, and not a requirement to include commercial properties, and their response is, well, really, what we do is build houses, and that's not our thing. So it sort of appears, and this would be anecdotal evidence, we haven't really done a study on this, but it appears that, for one thing, I think what Henry was addressing, that we need to incentivize this. It isn't just writing a law and enforcing it. I think it's incentivizing builders to actually develop mixed use. I think that's one of the things that I've heard from over the last 3 years, and the other is some requirements for. I heard some comments about ratios, but I think it has to do as much with the size of a property. A single building, it's really hard to do that in, but it could be possible in neighborhoods, except for then, of course, you start trampling on people's development rights and that sort of thing. So I think that this is. I thought I would give you some of that feedback and to add on to what Commissioner Cohn had said. But
I appreciate that. Zoning is all about encouraging builders and developers to accommodate the community's vision of itself. And I'm not not willing to give up our vision of ourselves in order to adapt what we want to some storage unit owner's vision. Excuse me, let me give this to Ms. Greer. Ms. Greer, could you protect this for us, please? In the mixed-use portion of the presentation to Planning Commission, and there were some caveats with it, but basically it was said that in a single building, if you want mixed use to work, it has to be a skyscraper. This is not. This is at Colfax and, gosh, I forget, Brain. Colfax and Brain. There are a number of these similar properties. I don't know whether you can see it. 5 stories, the entire bottom floor is mixed use. Not long ago, I had coffee with a developer who's working in the same area. And he's proud of his mixed use development. And I said, well, why don't you come over here and do mixed use? He said, I'm planning to come over there. It might be all residential, but in Denver, I have to build mixed use. I don't in Lakewood. And when we talk about mixed use and places like Belmar, we need to understand Belmar is mixed use, lowercase m, lowercase u. We're talking mixed use uppercase in both. Belmar was not a mixed use zoning district. It was a PUD. And some folks say PUDs don't work, but yet this one works marvelously. But it is a mixed-use lowercase district. So I don't want to confuse those things. I have seen, since I was a kid, and that was a long time ago, things like in one building, a deli, with the folks that own it living above it. Law offices with a loft for an attorney. So that sort of thing can be accomplished in one building. And I believe when I wasn't on council when this zoning ordinance was passed, but the vision we were told it represented was employment spaces, employment opportunities, along with some associated residential. Not a lot of residential and a lot of retail in the same building. So that's the kind of mixed use in a smaller module that I think the zoning ordinance and these folks who compiled it were looking for. Not to say that we can't have it both ways, that a mixed use district can have some of each, but I think one of the biggest problems we're having now is that what folks had envisioned as a rather smaller kind of mixed-use opportunity becomes 300 units of apartments. We capped some apartments to, some areas to 4 or 5 stories, thinking that way we don't have a behemoth of a project, and then we wind up with something that's 5 stories high by a quarter mile long. It's not quite what I think that vision was, but we want to hear what folks have to say and try to adapt what we have to what best presents the community's vision of itself. Thank you.
Mr. LeBeer.
Good job, Mayor. Excuse me.
Been working on it.
I just curious if y'all have any type of comparative analysis study of a city with a similar size as Lakewood that has been successful in doing things like mixed use and PUDs and that kind of stuff.
There certainly have been other communities that have done that. And I mentioned Wheat Ridge is very similar to us, very similar to portions of Lakewood. We had discussed different, what different communities had been doing in the area, and that's how we came up with our recommendations based on what we've been hearing and what we think would work in Lakewood. I mean, mixed use is certainly not appropriate everywhere, and if you, I mean, and we do need to make sure mixed use is mixed use, but you got to be careful how you do it, because if you, I mean, there has to be customers for retail, or it's going to fail. It's not going to work, and how to make that happen is not as simple as some people have presented it could be. We can come up with very simple solutions next week, and it's not going to work. Most of them. I think we can come up with realistic solutions in the planning world would be a very short time. I think we're on track to do that. I'd like to see it happen quicker, but and I have a lot of experience in here, and there's just so many things to look at to get what we want.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted, I think maybe I'm a visual learner, so I just sort of think in terms of, if there's some sort of comparative analysis out there that, maybe a similar city, geographic, same type of geography, landlocked, if there's some other examples out there that we can sort of give a vision to members of the community of what Lakewood could look like, I think that could be helpful.
Sorry, can I interrupt there? But Lakewood actually has one of the country's best examples of mixed use already. It's Belmar. It's where we are right now. We don't always have to look out to make what's best for our city. We can design and innovate our own ideas on what works here. But I don't think anybody who wants to live in Lakewood probably wants to, if they want to be Lakewood to be like Golden or Boulder, they would move there. So I think people have choices where they live, and they choose to live in Lakewood for a huge variety of reasons. But that's just
right.
But we have good examples here.
I totally agree, and that's one of the reasons I've made Lakewood my home. But I'm just giving you an example. For example, in the United Arab Emirates, which I assume a lot of us don't want to move there, but at the same time, they have a lot of great examples of what a zero carbon emission city looks like that don't, as far as I can tell, doesn't currently exist in the United States. So I was just making a point that any type of helpful illustration would be helpful, I think. And then I would also just leave you with this. I assume that you guys are all working on a lot of or taking a lot of look at making local economies as you're looking at the zoning, or you're looking at this sort of holistically. And I just want to leave you with one of the things that I got really excited about in Lakewood is when we started seeing some changes happening at Lamar Station Plaza, because it changed my interaction with the city. All of a sudden, I'm riding my bike to Lamar Station Plaza to go to some of the places there, some of the stores. And that's an interaction that I didn't previously have because of some of the changes that we've made. Before, I might have just hopped on the light rail and gone to Denver, or before the light rail was there, I might have just driven my car. And then now we have sidewalks going up and down Lamar Street. So I'm just saying all this progress has changed my interaction with the city, and obviously that's helped create a local economy. And now I no longer have to drive to go to get some food or something like that. So anyway, I know you're doing that, but I just want to leave you with local economies is something that I heard a lot at the door and I knocked thousands of doors in Ward 2. And a lot of people said that, they want to preserve the character of their neighborhoods, but they also want to see some revitalization. They want to see some business, some local business right there on Colfax and Sheridan. And that's something that that is important, I think, to the community, even though people are concerned about the growth and the changes happening. So, thanks.
Ms. Franks?
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Another thing I wanted to introduce that I've been starting to socialize is I think we may need to get away from citywide types of implementations. We have very distinct geographical areas, and they're not always cut up strictly by ward. Sometimes we just have geographical challenges. And I know that we're talking a lot about walkability. Well, I live in Green Mountain. That walkability was 20 years ago when I first got there was a little different, a little harder now. Now I've got an electric bike because it's not quite so walkable. I need a little assist, and I imagine as I age in place, it's going to become less walkable. So I want us to maybe stop thinking so much about a city-wide things and see, can we look at areas that make sense for certain walkability and for growth? Where do employment centers make sense where there's going to be a lot of ancillary services for those people that work in those buildings? If you're in an employment area and you're in the middle of a suburban area, how does that really offer you what you're looking for when you're on your lunch hour? You may want to run errands, take something to dry cleaners, run other errands. So again, we're starting to try to think outside the box, but I want to stress the urgency. Ward 4 folks are feeling like at every turn, every scrap of land is going to be developed with a luxury high-rise smack in the middle. So if we move too slow, it feels like other applications will come in and then we'll be locked in. I also wanted to talk about the legal aspects of property rights. We don't all agree. I've been very opposed to MES being a single use for quite some time. That's not everybody's interpretation. We have some legal challenges to maybe work through. But I also know that when the rezoning happened in 2012, a lot of property owners were enriched with being able to do more than they could before. And I actually, in many ways, now things can be next to me that couldn't be before. So I don't want us to get hung up on this property rights thing that feels like it's a stick I keep getting hit with. We changed it before, we can change it again as long as we do it in a way that is holistic. So I apologize for the stick thing, but I keep getting hit with that, like, well, we can't take people's property rights. Well, y'all changed mine who voted for it in 2012, and nobody come to my door and asked me what I thought. So we want to be careful about that aspect. And the other thing is, what I'm noticing is we are not getting the level of public engagement that I think we need in some of the areas that we want to get more input for. So I'd like us to start thinking about more creative, like maybe we meet in a park and draw folks towards us. How do we get communities that want development to tell us what they want, and communities that aren't looking for that to tell us more if we don't get out into the communities? And I'm just looking for maybe more creative ways that we can do that, like a get-together in the park, maybe something that's associated with an event where we set up a booth that's at an event, and we start giving people more creative ways to interact with us at varied schedules where then they can participate. So I just wanted to throw those things out as well as saying that I think the urgency of addressing the mixed use and making sure that we protect our current property owners is of utmost importance. Thank you.
Ms. Harrison.
I just have a quick comment. I was one of those people that sat through that 3.5 years of comprehensive discussion when we were doing the comprehensive plan. And when we talk about the MES, one of the things that I heard when we were doing that is that it was, I'm sorry, not comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance. When we were doing that, that was a comma on those uses. It was a comma. It could be residential, comma. It could be retail, comma. That is what I remember our discussion, and what I'm hearing us trying to define now is that it's and. So I think one of the things that we've got to clarify is whether we have commas or we have and. That's the big question that we have to address here. And then you can go on with the rest. But speaking from my memory and what I thought we were getting is it was comma. So you could have a building that's residential right next to a building that had retail in it, comma, comma, comma. not necessarily and. So I give that to you as my memory. Call it whatever it is. Thank you.
I remember it that way also.
Ms. Gutwein?
Okay, really quick. I want to second what Councilor Lipier said about asking for examples of just if we could see some examples of mixed use in suburban settings. I think would be really important to me because of the question of how many customers does it take to make this actually work. So it would be helpful. And then I forgot to mention this last thing about when you integrate into an existing neighborhood, a new development into existing, in addition to height, landscaping, design, the walkable access. So if there's a neighborhood next to a new commercial, making sure that there's a walking path through there, or if just maintaining that walkability. So that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Skilling?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, the definition I have of mixed-use employment that we're focusing on, it's intended to provide for office and campus development, with ancillary retail and residential uses along arterial and collector streets. So what we're all looking at is what's in the code, right, or what's in the zoning right now, and the way that a lot of folks are reading that is you've got ancillary, which means in support of retail and residential. So it's the same vision that everyone's talking about. You want to have a spot where somebody can, to Councilman Abel's point, you got the deli downstairs and the family lives upstairs. I guess that's the most simplistic way to look at it. Or even on a macro level, you've got the bottom floor is office spaces that people are renting out, and then buttressing that on each side, maybe you've got townhouses so that people don't have to drive their cars to Denver every day to go to work. So the way that we're all reading it, and the way that it was passed, and the way that I think a lot of us are having issues with, is that there isn't necessarily the commas to your point. It does say and. It's supposed to be a true mix. At least that's the reading that we're presented with in this. So just to clarify that, I've been reading the definition. Okay. Well, not necessarily my interpretation, just that's what the definition says. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Well, that exhausts the questions, and thank you very much. I definitely appreciate it. One other thing I'd just raise is there's an Oak Street project going in that has ground floor retail. And is that due to its transit proximity? Is that required, or is that a developmental decision? Do you know, Mr. Parker?
So repeat that. What's the development you're talking about?
So it's the Oak Street, the 5 stories going in at Oak Street. I think Mr. Cohen is the developer.
Right.
And it's ground floor retail.
There is ground floor retail in that building.
Okay. Is that required in that zoning?
Perhaps. We have 3 zones that we require ground floor retail, that we specifically require mixed use, MCT, MGT, and MET. That is GT, so that is required ground floor retail.
So we do have that opportunity, and I will say as a result as well, I've also heard the opposite from people on Colfax looking to develop, saying we're too stringent because we want to push for that sort of amenity and asking to, make an exception to change it back. So when you look at the different areas, there's something to be said for what is in Green Mountain versus what is on West Colfax. How does that all play together? And, when you look at mixed use, there could be also an opportunity for a process to where if you're coming in and you're saying, I want this certain threshold of a certain use and it's mixed, there's a public process involved, because you may have a small piece of property that's not going to work for mixed use. But if they can come to do a public process to explain that, that could be an opportunity as well. So thank you all. I think we heard some great questions. I think you heard some good urgency from folks. I will say this, being part of this process for a long time, one of the things I always heard was we're rushing, slow down. And I want to just be cautious about that, because that's why we're potentially where we're here, is because of this. But at the same time, we also updated a zoning code after 30 some years. And so I think some of these challenges are definitely not unique. Our friends to the east are going through this same type of update in the city and county of Denver, dealing with a lot of these, and hopefully we'll jump ahead with some of the issues that we've seen there and that have arisen, so we don't have that sort of groundswell. So, all right. So we will now go back to public comment. And since there's not a roster up there, I'll ask you to sign up here. And you have 3 minutes, and the public comment is pertaining to what you just heard. So if you'd like to come down, just please sign up right there.
I don't know what that is. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kathy Kentner. And Planning Commissioners. It's weird to talk to you behind my back. Sorry. Thank you very much. I'll try to make this brief. Thanks to, especially to Councilors Abel and Skilling. I think that I don't have much to add. First of all, I wanted to start just by kind of emphasizing the point that I thought that we were here to talk about mixed-use zoning, and I think Belmar is also wonderful, great support. It is not a mixed-use zone district. And perhaps one thing that I've heard in this is that we need to look more at our planned development, which is actually in our zone district, but I have heard on more than one occasion at neighborhood meetings being discouraged. Currently, it would be the way that we could have those tiny homes that many of us would like to see. So rather than discouraging it, maybe we could start encouraging the planned development zone district again, since it has had such great success as we've heard tonight. Next, I want to reiterate that we should preserve the integrity of our zoning ordinances and the wishes of the people, both at the recent roundtable with Ward 1 and the dozens of people with the hundreds of hours that put this document together. We should not change the intent or the definition. We should clarify it. Currently, there is only one place in the zoning ordinance that would even imply that the single use of multifamily is allowed in a mixed-use zone district, and that is the P in the use table. Please change the P to an L for a limited use, because it is not outright permitted without any limitations. It is limited by all of the other pages in the zoning ordinance. Many ways to go about that. Councilor Skilling said you could talk about percentages. Each project could maybe have a hearing, but please change that permitted to a limited use, and that could ensure that we can save that integrity of our zoning ordinance, and at the same time remove the discrepancies. I don't think we've yet had any suggestions that would remove the discrepancies. We want to, we do not want to change the goals, just remove those discrepancies. The third one is the open space requirement. Again, should for some erroneous reason you decide that single use of multifamily should be allowed, we do really need to, it is not healthy to have half the, or less than half of that open space. However, that probably is more evidence that our crafters of this document never intended for that to be a single use in those districts anyhow, or the open space requirement would have been the same. Height transition, I know I had a question mark with this too. However, in relation specifically to mixed use, over the last couple of years, I've attended many neighborhood meetings for rezonings, and mixed use was suggested over multifamily for the only reason being that the 75-foot height transition is required in in mixed use next to single family, but not in multifamily next to single family. That would be another easy change. And whereas Councillor Harrison, and I'm not sure, one of the planning commissions mentioned that you maybe had one impression, I would like to assure you that neighbors were clearly told that if a project was mixed-use employment, meaning it was office space before, it was going to be office space after the new zoning with just a few added residences above. And if it was retail before, it was still going to be retail with just a few added residences above. So that's what all of the neighbors were told. And last, Commissioner Edie, I believe it mentioned with traffic, said that more mixed-use zoning will help with our traffic situation. However, more mixed-use zoning will not help if it's single use. Our newest counselor, I don't want to I think I pronounced your name wrong, I just heard. I just was visiting the western suburbs of Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, very similar geographically, and many buildings that are mixed use on small lots. Thank you very much.
Next.
Good evening. I was one of those very unfortunate people that kept up on the rezoning plan long time ago. And when they brought up mixed use, the people didn't realize what that really meant. Now they find out that when they have mixed use, anything can go in their neighborhood. And they got rezoned without even knowing it. Some of these neighborhoods just, all of a sudden they became mixed use, and apartments could pop up in their neighborhoods. It was a terrible thing that they suggested and what they did. The second thing is Belmar was so subsidized by the city. They gave them power money to take care of their power. Their stormwater was paid for out of our stormwater fees. They were actually given 2% more tax money by charging the people of Belmar 2% more. And before the big box stores got here, this place was going down. It was just about ready to go bankrupt before they put the big box stores in, because that was the claim to fame. It was going to be a downtown, no big box stores, no major stores. Now the big box stores came in, saved their butt. As far as the traffic goes, I was listening 2 weeks ago I went to that the planning commission meeting. They were talking about Sim Street. Well, when they figured out what the traffic was going to be, they didn't even take a study on them, because that one particular building shouldn't add more traffic, enough traffic to Sims. But they didn't even take into effect what the St. Anthony's does, what these other places do. They don't add them together. They only concentrate on the one project. Cumulatively, Sims is a disaster, and they don't even look at that. Okay. What was I out next? Oh, when you think about what's going to happen in the future, 190,000 people left the Denver metro area because, one, the jobs weren't there, the high-paying jobs. Number two, the high price of housing. But the number one factor was traffic. Traffic was driving people out of Denver. That you got to remember. Number two thing is that retail is dying. You can ask Target. You can sure as hell ask Kmart. Kmart's almost out of business, and so is Sears. Retail is dying to the mail-in orders. Pretty soon, you're not going to have the big stores anymore. You're going to be ordering everything online, and it's going to be shipped to you, and you don't even have to get out of your car, which is really nice. But the tax revenue for the cities is going to drop. You got to remember that. Those are two big points. The third thing, well, it's more than third thing, eminent domain abuses. I've talked to, over the years, I've talked to a lot of people where the planning commission or the planning department will go up to them and say, well, you can either sell it to me at what we're going to pay you, or we're going to just eminent domain you. We're going to take your property for half the value. And whatever attorney fees that's going to cost you to save your property, you're going to lose on the property anyway. But they don't really, well, this a perfect example is that bike path. Planning department went up to them and said, all right, we're going to take 10 feet out of your backyard. Their backyards are 20 feet deep. So we're going to take half your backyard. We're only going to give you half the price, though, of what it's worth.
Wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, I will.
Your time's up.
Okay. And they said, but if you don't sell it to us, we'll take it. And we're going to take down the sound wall along RTD. And we want you to police the bike path.
Thanks, Mr. Mueller. Appreciate it.
That's not right.
Next up, Carol, were you up? I think, yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, it is clear from this, the results of the last election that the people don't like the direction the city is going as far as high-density development, along with other issues such as traffic and open space. Developers shouldn't be able to do whatever they want. Current property owners have rights too. I'd like to see, well, I liked what Charlie Abel said about small single homes. I'd like to see more small single homes built instead of high-density apartments. Lakewood needs a place for older people who want to downsize and don't want to live in a condo or an apartment. Also, those starting families would like to buy small homes that they can afford with a yard instead of an apartment with no lawn that is expensive. The only other comment I'd like to make is I was very disappointed, like so many other people who worked so hard on getting signatures for the initiative, that the citizens didn't get to vote on. So I hope that we can either vote on it or you can accept the way it is and implement it. So
thank you. So if you'd like to comment, if you could get in the bullpen here and get signed up, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
We talked about the community input, and I am discouraged that there wasn't more. I have to commend the Planning Commission. They came to our ward meeting, a number of them did, and we had a very robust discussion. Maybe I would suggest, instead of specific meetings, which it was very nice of you to do that, and you took your time, so I commend you, but maybe some joint ward meetings where we could have these topics as just what the ward meeting is talking about. I know having 5 of them would be a lot for these folks, but maybe put a couple of them together, 2 or 3 of them, and we're all used to going to our ward meeting. We have that on our calendar, whereas these other meetings, we may have had some conflicts. So that might be a place where we could all get some community input. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment. Paul, you were just getting up? Okay. All right, I'll close public comment. So thank you all really quick. I do have to comment on one comment made, and in my 10 years on this council, I don't think we've ever taken a property, and there's been nothing taken on the D10, and certainly our planning department does not go threaten property owners into taking their property. So, you know, I have to at least set the record straight on that. So we'll go to reports, and I'll start down here with Mr.
Mayor, your board there, I have a request to speak lighted up.
Okay.
I believe that we've only taken one residential property in total with ED, and that was the rock house that sat behind House of Pancakes over at Creekside, or what's now Creekside.
And what year was that?
I don't know. I didn't have gray hair.
So clearly 20 years ago.
At least.
There you go. Thank you for that. Mr. LeBeer.
Councilor Abel, I think you still look good, though. Just want you to know.
You're way too charitable. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I attended the Lakewood Lights and the mayor's tree lighting ceremony. I think it was fantastic. I recommend going. It was a lot of fun. Glad to see so many community members and friends. And though I must admit I was a little sad because, you know, I didn't get a chance to get a photo with Santa, so maybe next year. And then also just a reminder about Riot, the Riot Gala. It's the 40 West annual fundraiser. It's on December 8th, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's at Intrigue Auto Collection, which is on 8th Avenue, just so you know. Thanks.
Well done. Mr. Skilling.
I think the only report is this Saturday will be the Ward 4 meeting, 9:30. 9:30, same place as usual at the Green Mountain Presbyterian Church there on Alameda in Mississippi. And it'll be my first one where I'm not being a nuisance. So I look forward to that, and hopefully everyone can come out.
Ms. Gutwein.
Thank you. My family also had a lot of fun at Lakewood Lights, and we brought the kids and got to ride the fire truck and turn the lights on, and Councilor Abel even took our family photo for us with Santa. So it was a great time, and hope everyone gets to enjoy that event next year. And we had a really great ward meeting this past Saturday. We had Steve Bell come in from Jeffco Schools to talk about one of the issues we heard a lot in the community is how are our schools going to accommodate growth that we're seeing in Lakewood. So we got to spend about an hour and a half. He presented, and then we had community questions. And I think everyone walked away saying that they at least learned something and had a better idea for how complex that issue is. So really appreciate Jeffco Schools for sending him out, and to everyone who joined us in the community. So thank you.
I wanted to thank all of the citizens who have put up elaborate holiday displays. As I drive home each night, well after dusk, it is such a pleasure to see all the folks who have lit up their properties so lovely. So I wanted to say thank you to all you guys. I also wanted to thank former Councilor Dave Wickman for his support on the December newsletter during this transition period. We ran out of time, and so I wanted to thank him for helping put that newsletter together for us to get it out on time. We are going to be next month creating kind of our next generation newsletter that Councilor Skilling and I will be putting together. And so we're going to be looking for feedback on how to shape that newsletter to be more meaningful to the community. We'll be looking for folks to submit events and different community happenings to us. I'd like to also have a photo submission area where we celebrate flower gardens and nice displays and ways, protect people's privacy, but really showcase all the lovely things that are going on in our neighborhood. So certainly wanted to encourage you all to do all of that, and certainly thank everybody and wish everybody a happy holiday season for those who will be out of town. I know we got some folks going out for extended leave, so thank you very much.
I just wanted to echo Dana's comments. If other counselors, we would highly recommend that you invite Mr. Bell to come speak, because our people came out with a really good understanding of how that goes. So I'd encourage you to invite him. And I want to remind everybody, this Thursday and this Friday, there will be a combined choral concert with the Lakewood Symphony and the Colorado Mormon Chorale. Thursday night and Friday night at the Lakewood Steak Building, which is 6655 West Jewel Avenue. It begins at 7 o'clock, and it is phenomenal. I think you'll really enjoy it. And the best part is the price is right. It's free. So come and enjoy. It is the reason for the season. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to remind everyone that the Ward 3 meeting at Phillips United Methodist Church this month is going to be canceled because of Christmas. We're a few days. It's Saturday the 23rd, and Christmas is on the 25th. So we're going to cancel it, and we'll pick it up in January. That's it.
Ward 2 will be canceled this month also, and the O'Kane lighting will be at 7 p.m. tomorrow at the O'Kane House. So I would welcome everybody out there. Thank you.
The Ward 1 meeting was last Saturday. It was a very interesting discussion, and we had our December meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to report, we had our second Ward 3 meeting this morning, Councilman Roybal and I want to thank all those that attended that. We had a very open and robust discussion, and I look forward to more of those in the future. We're also going to cancel our second ward meeting, which would be normally on New Year's Day on the 1st of January, so that'll be canceled as well. And then we'll have it, pick it up again the first Monday in February. That's all. Thank you.
Well, there goes my New Year's Day plans. So, a couple of things. The tree lighting was fantastic. Thank you to the Community Resources Department for putting that all together. 11,000 LED bulbs and a real Christmas tree this year, which was pretty fantastic. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, many of you have heard about their interest in the Horseshoe property, which is 59 acres at the Federal Center site. They are currently actively trying to pursue that piece of land. They have until December 26th to submit their proposal to the Department of Health and Human Services. If they are granted that, they'll have 10 days, once they submit, 10 days to see if their financing and their plan is sufficient. If it is, then they'll have another 45 days to put that together. They're looking at two options. One potentially on a leased parcel would be temporary trailers and tents. And the second option would be about 600 to 700 residential units. So the way that the McKinley Act works is if they are granted that, they have to use all 59 acres for homeless services. And it's very strict within the boundaries of that. So they're on a tight time schedule. I know that they're going to be meeting with the council members in Ward 1, I think, coming up. But that's where that is, and that is all through the federal government. And there's not really anything within that realm that we can do as a city. I will tell you, for myself personally, I do not believe it's the highest and best use for that piece of property. I certainly understand our homeless needs. And I think if, again, going back to the term bold, if we're going to take something on like that, be much better suited to have something that encompasses a diversity of housing or mixed of uses rather than a singular use. So that'll be interesting, but we should find out, I think, pretty much by the end of the year where that goes. If you get a chance, come out here. There's a poinsettia tree. I guess it's here every year, but I just learned about it, and our greenhouses grow 600 poinsettias a year, and they start in July. And so if you go out here, and you'll see them at all of our rec centers and other city venues, but check it out. It's really cool. It's a cool poinsettia holiday tree. Colorado Gives Day is tomorrow. We will be here next Monday night, 11 o'clock, the 11th, and then we'll be off till the 8th. So come back and join us next week if you'd like. And I think that is all I have. Henry, anything from the Planning Commission?
No, I don't think we have anything other than what we've reported.
All right. Well, again, thank you all very much. Ms. Hodson's waving at me. Hi. Yes.
May I give a quick report,
Yes.
please? I'll make it very quick. Thank you. those poinsettias you just spoke of, they were born and raised in our own greenhouses. Also, just so you know, that the mayor spoke a little bit about the Colorado Coalition of the Homeless, and we did meet with them, and they are more than willing, although we have limited opportunities to impact the outcome at this point. They have committed to us that they will hold public meetings and help inform the citizenry in terms of what their plans are and what that timeline is. So we will continue to push that so that we're communicating as much as we can, or we're persuading them to do so. And finally, as the mayor just said, next week is December 11th, and we have a regular council meeting. Before that, at 5:30, we have a second installment of our council orientation. For the new city council folks especially, we'll be rolling out our new video segment where you'll meet each of the city department heads on video, and they'll go through an overview of their departments. We're trying this out for the first time. You will soon meet them individually and be able to have kind of deeper conversations with them, but the intent here is to get a broad overview of each of the departments. That way, again, if you can hear it for the first time, put names to faces, but also you can call that up again if you want a refresher. So that's our intent, and we'll see if that's as effective as we're hoping it will be. So 5:30, December 11th, please be there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And I'll be sending an email out to council tomorrow, but we will be doing approving the council committees next Monday night, and it looks like we were able to get everybody where they wanted to be. And some got a little bit extra for Christmas, so enjoy that. All right. Thank you to our agents, Agent Hipwell, Agent Hunt. Thank you very much for keeping us safe. And we are adjourned at 9:15 p.m.